Okay, this is the first simultaneous call from that final Olympic match, and let's see how we get here and why did they call simultaneous? Okay, so let's start watching like right from the get-go. Here I've cut together most of the close calls, and you're gonna see they go to a video a ton this match.
Huh?
That's a weird call.
That's a
It's
weird
because he hit.
So right away, I mean, you could hear some of our like live commentary over it. This is, and that's my brother and Simon talking. You can hear like there's a bit of confusion right away with that first call. Now, I think this is a great example of why technique matters. Left, you're going to see immediately blast with arm during this slight moment of hesitation that he feels, but you're going to see that it's actually his follow through. So like this kind of collapsing lunge with like this low arm position, it can look like a counter attack compared to Kao Long's like pretty committed attack. So like during this section, this low hand position looks like he's trying to curl and hide. Now this is significantly later in the match, but take note of these next two calls. In fact, let me try and slow that down. Okay, this is a really important motion because if you notice, this is a clear example of like a slight tempo advantage. You're going to see on the left, Machi goes for a half step back, which helps him change direction, while Kao Long tries to full on jump back, then immediately blast into a lunge. Now, this is important because it shows his idea of he's trying to get him in prep, like right is trying to hit left in prep, uh, but because left has already started that quick forward motion without a pullback of the arm, he still has right of way. Okay, this next hit is important because it shows that forward movement is not an attack. Forward movement is preparation. So when left searches for the blade and then continues to move forward, he's even though blades are crossing and they could hit, Kao Long is basically showing like, hey, why didn't he hit me? He is waiting. It is my turn. Yeah, so you see that here where the ref awards it to the right. He says like, no, you were waiting. It's right's turn. But this is super cool because it's showing that referees are getting a much better idea of intention. Whereas in 2016, it was defined by, hey, who can hold their attack the longest? Now it's saying, hey, who's just going for it? I'm showing this one again because this is an example of like you need to actually lunge, not just stick out your arm and hope that that is an attack. Had Kao Long lunged there, definitely. So now here you can see the back leg going forward, and this I think is what cost him this hit. Had he like stuck the lunge, definitely his. So here again we see this idea of left blasting in, but you can see like with this frame hold, like it doesn't look that favorable. It looks a lot like that first hit. So even though Maki asked for video, they keep the call right. And again, I think this is a huge thing for lefties. Lefties are often rewarded for this type of attack and prep, quote unquote. Like, yes, his arm is back, but the whole idea is that from the ref's view, it looks like a counter just because of that low hand position. Now, in this next one, you can see he adjusts. He just shoots his arm. They call it attack no. This is really important for that next hit. Notice that continual forward movement of the arm. Now, this next one could arguably be attack no from the right continuation, but notice how solid that delayed arm was. Like, on purpose, his arm stayed back to draw. I'm just including it again for Fencing Tuna to freak out over. So now we get to the simultaneous call. Okay. Now this one I'm just gonna slow mo it a bunch of times so we could really break it down. Okay, so firstly we need to look at these little half steps back from the left. So you could argue right there that that gave up right of way. However, Kao Long searches. Now this whole match, the refs have been super picky for both sides about searching and backward movement, which as well as low arm position finishes, which is why for me this is actually a pretty good culmination of the match, saying, hey, you guys both had great ideas, but you both made these tiny little mistakes. So let's look and see like who's taking over or who's moving forward or who's starting with the arm and looking at all the different components that could define one's attack. Okay, time for nerdy rule stuff. So this is just to show that the foil rules came from the Italian and French schools of thought. So if you guys are Italian or French, this is on you. The next clip is to just to show fencing time. This is the time needed for one fencing action. That's important because a lot of people will justify any sort of right of way question by saying, oh, it was within my fencing time. Okay, now this one is annoyingly important because it shows that to actually attack, it needs to start from the arm and you need to be continually threatening the opponent, preceding the lunge or the flesh. Now, this means that if you just lunge at someone without actually pointing at their target, you've just impaled yourself. So this is where a lot of people get confused with like compound attacks. Like, is it right of way? Is it not right of way? Because you'll see a lot of time people will hit a compound attack with a bent arm. However, that is usually only awarded if the opponent clearly counterattacks in a way of like hitting and ducking or something that is obviously not their attack with a lunge or a flesh. But if they stay in that lunge or flesh, maybe it's attacking prep. This this was included just so that you could see that simple direct, simple indirect, and compound. Here it doesn't really state what defeats what. Usually, an indication of one light will show that you picked a more efficient move, but technically they are equal in value. If you speak with a lot of high level refs, the general convention is that a simple direct attack will defeat a compound attack, which is why we start to get this kind of question in this final hit. So let's go back to it again. Okay, so we see them both start. We're going to see right actually continually moves the feet forward, and searches for the blade and finishes. The search results in no blade contact, but let's look at what the left does. Okay, so we see some forward initial movement. He even wants to go before préalé, but now we see, oh, there's those half steps back. He backs off, and then he starts an attack. Okay. Now let's break that down further. So, okay, we can see he starts coming forward. And after he senses this hesitation, this search of the blade, you're going to see him come forward and actually hide his blade a little bit. See right there. And at this moment, the other side had already started their attack. So here's a fun way to look at it. Let's look at what their feet do. Okay, if we just look at their feet, honestly, looks like right, given how he never stops. Now, if we just look at their arms, oh, search no, and then left goes. But the weird thing is that when we combine them, we get this weird mix. And this is why I think this is calling simultaneous is such a good call. Because look, left moves back so his blade doesn't get hit. In this moment, right starts moving forward a tiny bit and launches a lunge. But left, in a single fencing time, so in a single moment of decision making, decided to start a quote unquote step lunge. So, like, how can you say that either one of them had the correct idea?
I have 2 gold medals.
Honestly, if they called Simo, I would be pretty hyped about that.
Actually.
Now, at the point where you're spending at least 10 minutes arguing about whether or not this is one side's or the other side's, I think that's a perfect case of just throwing it out and saying, hey, we don't really think anyone had a clearer idea. Like, they both went as fast as they could. One was like, hey, there's only enough space for a lunge. The other one, who created some space, said, hey, I'm going to do a step lunge. So we toss it. I think if Maki had started with his arm extending just a fraction of a second sooner, then it would for sure go to him, though.
Let's see what they call. That could go either way, boys.
They should call it Simo.
That could go either way. Oh, he's like, I don't want to make this
He's
decision.
like, come on, bro.
Oh, yeah, he's like, come on. They could just say Simul. That's the safest call.
They should say
They
this
should
side
say-
searches, this side starts.
Okay. So there you have it. Let us know what you think in the comments below.